Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, September 17th, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today: suspected would-be Trump assassin looks forward to World War III. So this is another story here about Ryan Ruth, the 58-year-old man who was arrested on Sunday for allegedly trying to shoot former President Donald Trump. He has this book that he published last year titled Ukraine's Unwinnable War. It's on Amazon. I bought the Kindle version. I think that's the only way you can buy it. Yeah. And I mean, so actually, this is the full title: Ukraine's Unwinnable War, the Fatal Flaw of Democracy, World Abandonment, and the Global Citizen Taiwan, Afghanistan, North Korea, and the End of Humanity. So the title, the run-on sentence of a title, gives you an idea of what the contents of this book are like. I mean, it's clearly written by someone who's very all over the place, very scattered, not mentally well. And he talks a lot about Ukraine and you know, wishes that he could fight in Ukraine. And so he actually says in this book, and I have to give credit to Michael Tracy for this because he pulled this out of the book. This is deep in the book. I didn't get too far. I read a good amount of it, but he says basically that he's looking forward to World War III and wants to burn down the Kremlin. So he said, quote, "I do dream of the day that we cross over into Russia and march towards Moscow. That is the part of this third world war that I look forward to. I want to be the one that burns down the Kremlin and all the cruelty that it signifies," end quote. So you could tell that's someone who is delusional. He's a 58-year-old. Apparently he's a former construction worker from the U.S. He thinks he's going to be the one that if World War III happens, he's going to march into Moscow and burn down the Kremlin. And then in another part of the book, Ruth criticizes Trump for pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal and said that he must share the blame for voting for the former president. Ruth wrote, quote, "I must take part of the blame for the retarded child that we elected for our next president that ended up being brainless, but I am man enough to say that I misjudged and made a terrible mistake, and Iran, I apologize," end quote. So Ruth went on to say that Iran could assassinate both Trump and himself. So he said, quote, "You are free to assassinate Trump as well as me for that error in judgment," end quote. The reason why I wanted to put that full quote in there was because this kind of made some headlines. It says, you know, the Trump suspect said that Iran should kill Donald Trump. That was basically the headlines that I saw. And it didn't really give the full picture. And it kind of plays into the narrative. If you remember, after the last assassination attempt, I think this was the only aspect of it that I really covered. There was this leak to CNN that, Iran is planning, was planning to assassinate Trump. It's just a total bogus story. They said it was based on one single human source, which means a guy said that. And so, this kind of plays into the narrative. But if you look at the whole quote, I mean, it's clearly someone that's just completely out there saying, "I'll kill me and kill Trump as well." It's just totally out there. It's not like some mastermind who's, might be working for the Iranians or something. So in this book and in social media posts, Ruth repeatedly expressed his wish to fight in Ukraine against the Russian military. Some of this I went over yesterday. In 2022, he traveled to Ukraine but said that he was too old to fight. So then his plan B was to help recruit people from around the world for Ukraine's Foreign Legion. I put a screenshot of one of his tweets there. His account was suspended on Sunday. And again, just so many tweets about saying, "Oh, I wish I could, I'm ready to volunteer and fight and die for Ukraine." So something interesting that I saw, I mentioned yesterday that there was an interview he did with Semaphore in 2023 where he complained that Ukraine did not want to take Afghan soldiers. And he also said that many of his partners met with Ukraine's defense ministry Again, who knows if these claims are true, but there was something interesting is that Semaphore published a follow-up article, after his arrest that kind of shared some more details about that interview. And they said that when they interviewed Ruth, he was the head of a group that he started called the International Volunteer Center. And the article cited a Ukrainian involved in foreign recruitment that said Ruth was, even by the standards of that frantic moment, a bit over the top. So a lot of the foreigners, the Americans that went to volunteer or got involved in schemes like this were kind of, a lot of them are criminals. Some of them, like Malcolm Nance was one. He's a MSNBC contributor. He basically just went over there for a photo shoot, and he did like a news segment standing in a Ukrainian military uniform. I mean, just a complete joke. So they got some people like that to volunteer. So they're saying, some of these people are kind of out there and useless, and he was a bit over the top even for that. But this Ukrainian source also said that Ruth was authentically involved in the efforts to bring in foreign troops. So in some form, they're saying he was authentically involved. And then since his arrest, Ukraine's Foreign Legion has distanced itself from Ruth. They said in a statement to Euronews, quote, "We would like to clarify that Ryan Wesley Ruth has never been part of associated with, or linked to the International Legion in any capacity," end quote. So Ruth briefly appeared in a propaganda video from May 2022 for the Azov Brigade, which is a notorious neo-Nazi unit that's part of the Ukrainian National Guard. In response, the Azov Brigade said that the event was a demonstration that anyone could attend. The military unit said, quote, "We would like to officially state that Ryan Wesley Ruth has no connection to Azov and has never had any connection to Azov," end quote. So he attended a few protests. I saw pictures of him in support of the Azov Brigade. So just a lot of, I'm curious to see what might come out about if he did have real contacts with the Ukrainian government and things like that. All right, so the next story here, really, really horrific. Gaza's health ministry names 710 infants killed by Israel. Gaza's health ministry has released a 649-page document that lists the names of 34,344 Palestinians who have been killed by Israel's assault on the Gaza Strip. And the link there is to the health ministry's Telegram account, and they shared a PDF file, 649 pages. And the document lists 11,355 children, including 710 infants under the age of 1. So you look at the list, their age is 0. 710 aged 0 who've been killed. And their names make up the first 14 pages of the document. So 14 pages of dead babies. And last month, after 3 day-old twins were killed by Israeli forces, the health ministry said that the number of newborns killed since October 7th reached 115. And there's no set age for what's considered a newborn, but generally it's any baby under 2 months old. And I mean, just think about that, 115 newborn babies killed. And newborn babies have also starved to death, and Israeli troops left 4 premature babies to die at the Al Nasser hospital last year, if you remember that story, when the Palestinians were able to return to the hospital. They found them decomposing in incubators. I mean, again, just the horrors that we're talking about here. So Gaza's media office says that more than 16,700 children have been killed by Israeli forces, which is higher than the numbers on this list, because this list that was released by the health ministry, it includes the names of only those who have been fully identified. They say that they're working to identify the remaining over 7,000 bodies that they've counted. So this is a lot of names. I mean, very meticulous to write all this stuff down. And I know when they previously released names, they kind of have been cross-checked by monitoring groups that found that these numbers and these figures are reliable. And they put out this infographic here. So The total number killed when they did this was as of August 31st, so about 2 weeks ago. The total number of killed was 40,738, and the number of people who they have identified, 34,344. And out of that, again, 11,355 children, which was 33%, 6,297 women, 2,955 elderly men and women, and men 13,737. So out of that number of identified, 60% are children, women, and elderly, and the remaining 40% are men ranging in age from 18 to 59. And of course, these numbers are considered an undercount, both the identified and their overall death toll, because it does not include Palestinians who are missing and presumed dead under the rubble. So again, I mean, it could be a few hundred more out of the 41,000, out of the over 7,000. The difference between the identified and what the death toll is now, it could be another few hundred babies who have been killed. I mean, it seems like every day you see children being killed, and a lot of times it's very, very young children. And this is all being supported, funded by the United States government, by the U.S. taxpayers. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills 20 more Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. So Gaza's health ministry said Monday that Israeli forces killed 20 Palestinians and injured 76 in the previous 24-hour period, bringing the death toll to 41,226. So that's the latest death toll from Gaza's health ministry. And they said that many people are still trapped under the rubble, and they're not being counted. And if you look at this picture, these are people mourning Palestinians who were killed in strikes on the Nusret refugee camp. And you can see, they have them wrapped in these white sheets. Some of their bodies are, faces are exposed, but you see some of them are very small bodies. So again, more children being massacred here in this genocidal slaughter. And one of the strikes, the strike on the Nusret refugee camp, killed 10 Palestinians. And there was also an Israeli strike on a bakery in the Al-Sumad refugee camp, which is in part of the Al-Mawasi area, which is a so-called safe zone. Israel has just repeatedly bombed and targeted. So the horrors in Gaza continue. All right, I want to mention our sponsor for today's show. I feel bad that I'm always doing their ad right after a very horrific story, but that is the Expat Money Summit, and this is being put on by Mikkel Thorup, the host of the Expat Money Show, and a highly sought-after expert when it comes to the expat lifestyle, things that you need to know if you want to live in another country, if you want to preserve your liberty and your wealth. And Mikkel is a fan of antiwar.com. I did his show last year. We talked about the best place to live if World War III or a global war breaks out. And we settled on South America. But anyway, so this is being put on from October 7th to the 11th. You can go to expatmoneysummit.com to get your complimentary ticket. That is expatmoneysummit.com, and the type of things that you will learn. One thing that's really interesting about this is you could learn how to craft your plan B. So say you're American or you live somewhere else and you don't have any way to get citizenship, or you don't think you have a path to citizenship in another country, that this is really important information for you if you want that plan B. And I like I've said many times now, my wife's Australian. I like knowing that we could move to Australia if we chose to, for whatever reason. And headline speakers include Dr. Ron Paul, Doug Casey, Scott Horton, Tom Woods, Mark Faber, Tom Luongo. So get your free ticket at expatmoneysummit.com or click the link in the description to get a discount for a VIP ticket that gives you access to all these VIP panels, including one that I'm going to be doing on the risk of World War III. So go check that out. All right, so back to the news here. Israeli strikes on Lebanon kill a Hezbollah member. So this one is from Jason Ditz. Israeli forces carried out multiple airstrikes against southern Lebanon, targeting the village of Hula and the town of Tyre Harfa. One Hezbollah member was reported killed in the Hula strike and 4 people wounded, 3 of whom were hospitalized. The strike on Tyre Harfa targeted paramedics carrying out humanitarian duties at the time, and 2 of them were wounded. Paramedics have been targeted pretty frequently in southern Lebanon by Israel. One thing that's interesting in here is that there's reports that Netanyahu is threatening to fire Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister. And one reason is that he might get in the way of starting a full-scale war in Lebanon, even though he actually has said some things publicly about escalating in Lebanon. And earlier, months ago, he was saying that he seemed all about escalations in Lebanon. But I know recently he said that the time for war in Lebanon was back in October 2023. So he might be more hesitant of it now. And that's apparently one reason why Netanyahu is considering firing him. And him and Netanyahu have clashed a lot. All right, so the next one here, Israeli settler mob attacks West Bank elementary school. This article is from The Cradle. So Israeli settlers under the protection of the army launched a violent attack on a school near the occupied West Bank city of Jericho on the 16th of September. That is Monday. Troops and settlers stormed the Arab al-Kabneh elementary school in the Arab al-Malit area northwest of Jericho. Wafa news agency reported, quote, armed Israeli settlers attacked the area, beat an elderly man, stormed the elementary school, and assaulted students and teachers. There is a state of panic and fear among local residents, especially women and children. The school is still under siege and the students are being abused inside, end quote. So, sounds very horrific here. Israeli forces arrested teachers as more settlers arrived at the scene. Students and staff were assaulted with crowbars. Video footage shows people being taken away in handcuffs as settlers sit nearby. Yeah, apparently the Israeli forces showed up and they started arresting teachers at the school. The school's principal was tied up, according to the Al-Baidar Organization for Bedouin Rights. So just brazen terrorism from the Israeli settlers in the West Bank. This stuff continues, and they're always backed by the Israeli military, either tacitly or they just, don't, they kind of just sit by as these attacks happen. All right, so the next one here, Iran says that direct talks with the U.S. are possible. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said Monday that direct talks with the U.S. would be possible if Washington showed that it was not hostile toward Tehran. He said, quote, we are not hostile toward the U.S. They should end their hostility towards us by showing their goodwill in practice. We are brothers with the Americans as well, end quote. So very diplomatic here from Pezeshkian, and he made these comments at a press conference when asked if he would consider direct talks with the U.S. to revive the 2015 nuclear deal known as the JCPOA, which the Trump administration withdrew from in 2019. The Iranian leader also reiterated Iran's stance that it's not seeking nuclear weapons. He said Iran is only enriching uranium at 60% purity, which is still below the 90% needed for weapons grade. And he said that they're doing this in response to the U.S. tearing up the JCPOA, which limited Iranian enrichment at 3.67%. So you could see why Ruth was so mad about Trump pulling out of that deal. So Pezeshkian said, quote, I think we said many times we don't want to do this at all. We want to solve our technical and scientific needs. We are not looking for nuclear weapons. We adhered to the framework written in the nuclear deal. We are still looking to maintain those frameworks. They tore them. They forced us to do something, end quote. So another reason, Iran increased its uranium enrichment to 60% in 2021, actually in direct response to an Israeli sabotage attack on Iran's Natanz nuclear facility, which was timed to sabotage indirect talks between Washington and Tehran that just began. Brazen attack. They set off an explosive inside this nuclear facility, and that was Iran's response, was to increase the uranium enrichment. And that's something I got to say, when you read about this situation, Iran's nuclear program, the enrichment, you're never going to see that context, anywhere else really besides antiwar.com. Obviously there's other sites that are good on it, but this is something I followed closely since I started doing this full time in 2020. And I just remember kind of being shocked by the brazen Israeli covert attacks inside Iran that just barely get any attention, and how you see what Israel does is that they do these attacks. Iran responds by increasing their uranium enrichment. They increased it to 20% after Israel assassinated an Iranian scientist. And then Israel turns around and says, aha, look, they're trying to build a nuclear bomb. And again, the context is just always missing. So Pezeshkian, he took office in July, and during his campaign, he said that he would enter talks with the U.S. and other Western countries to get sanctions lifted, and the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, appeared to give him the green light recently, saying that there was no harm in engaging with the enemy, as he put it. So Pezeshkian is willing to talk. It seems like he's going to try to pursue this. I don't think he's going to have a willing partner, at least anytime soon. No chance the Biden administration is going to start some kind of talks about this before November. Kamala Harris is running on being tougher on Iran than Donald Trump was, who, if you look at his record, he was a huge Iran hawk with the sanctions, pulling out of the deal, killing Soleimani, and Trump and J.D. Vance. Trump fed into this narrative that Iran somehow might have had something to do with his assassination, saying that if he's killed, Iran should be blown off the face of the earth. So not a good sign there. He has said in interviews that he's rethinking sanctions. Maybe he should lift some sanctions, but there's no reason really to be hopeful when it comes to Iran. So hopefully things change. Things could always change, but the Iranians seem very willing right now to engage in some diplomacy with the U.S. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. military says the Niger withdrawal is complete. So here's some good news. U.S. Africa Command said on Monday that it had completed its withdrawal from Niger by the September 15th deadline. So September 15th was Sunday, and they put this press release out on Monday. The command said that the withdrawal of approximately 1,000 military personnel began in May. AFRICOM completed its withdrawal from Air Base 101 in Niamey on July 7th, and the last U.S. troops left Air Base 201 in Agadez on August 5th. I had a story on that last month when they completed the withdrawal from Air Base 201, and they were saying that there were still some troops at the embassy that needed to be pulled out. So it looks like it is all done. And AFRICOM said that a U.S. Africa Command coordination element consisting of a 2-star general officer and staff has also departed from Niger. So the U.S. was ordered to leave by the government that came to power following a July 2023 coup that ousted former President Mohamed Bazoum. The U.S. was looking to stay in the country, but was asked to leave after a meeting with the government. The new prime minister, said that the U.S. was asked to leave due to threats from U.S. officials about Niger's relationship with Russia and Iran. So the U.S. is working to beef up its presence elsewhere in West Africa after losing Air Base 201, which served as a drone hub for U.S. military operations across the region. The Wall Street Journal reported last week that the Pentagon is refurbishing an airfield in Benin to accommodate U.S. helicopters, deploying Green Berets to Ivory Coast, and is also working on a deal with Chad to send troops to a base that used to be occupied by U.S. forces. So they're looking elsewhere. No sign yet that they've made any deals to build another major drone base or anything like that. All right, so the next one here, Venezuela arrests U.S. citizens over alleged CIA plot. So the Venezuelan government said over the weekend that it arrested 6 foreigners, including 3 American citizens, over an alleged plot to destabilize the country that included a plan to assassinate President Nicolas Maduro. Among the Americans arrested was Wilbur Joseph Castañeda Gomez. He's a member of the U.S. Navy, so currently still in the Navy. U.S. officials said that he is a first-class petty officer who was formerly a Navy SEAL and insisted that he was traveling on his own. Venezuela's interior minister alleged that Castañeda Gomez led the plot on behalf of the CIA, a charge that was denied by the U.S. government. The interior minister said, quote, "The U.S. is behind this operation. The U.S. is handing over these firearms. They allow them to freely circulate so they can arrive in Venezuela and be used in an operation," end quote. Venezuelan authorities said that they seized 400 rifles of U.S. origin that were allegedly linked to the plot, and some were displayed during the press conference that the Interior Minister gave. You can see the picture there. The State Department said that any claims the U.S. was involved in a plot to kill Maduro were categorically false. And, you see these claims a lot from Venezuela that they disrupted these plots and they blame the U.S. a lot. But there is reason to suspect the U.S. in things like this, of course, because they've been, trying to get rid of Maduro for a long time now. And this comes after the Biden administration announced that it rejected the results of the 2024 election and recognized the Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia, who was on the ballot for the opposition, as the winner. Venezuela's election authorities declared Maduro the winner, but the opposition disputed the results and also claimed victory. So the U.S. isn't recognizing Maduro, but that's not really anything new. In 2019, the U.S. rejected the result of Venezuela's 2018 elections and recognized opposition figure Juan Guaido as acting president. The U.S. supported Guaido's failed coup attempt against Maduro, and that regime change effort came with very heavy economic sanctions and everything. So, the U.S. is certainly involved. At the same time, Venezuela, the government, they kind of point to the U.S. to blame them for everything. And again, the U.S. is a easy scapegoat because the U.S. is openly trying to carry out regime change in the country and keeps them under what is essentially an economic embargo. And it is, suspicious that an active duty member of the U.S. military was arrested. All right, so the next one here, NATO Secretary General drops bomblets on the way out. So this is an article from Aaron Sobczak at Responsible Statecraft. I really like the title. So Stoltenberg gave an interview with Foreign Policy on Monday, and he doubled down on his hawkish outlook toward Russia. Stoltenberg, who has been NATO chief since 2014 and will be replaced by former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte in October, indicated that since North Korea, China, and Iran have been supporting Russia in its conflict with Ukraine, that NATO should work more closely with its allies in the Asia-Pacific region. And China's support for Russia is just trading with them. They're not actually sending them weapons. So he said, quote, North Korea is providing an enormous amount of, in particular, ammunition to Russia, and a lot of that is transported on railroad, which is crossing from the border from North Korea, the land border, into Russia, and then all the way to the front lines. And that capacity is quite huge to transport by railroad. And that's also a reason why it is important to continue to have severe sanctions on North Korea, and also a reason why NATO has stepped up further the cooperation we have with our Asia-Pacific partners that includes South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, end quote. So they are getting into their the North Atlantic Alliance is making its way to the Pacific. And he was asked about the potential for NATO overextension and said, quote, so while NATO is a regional alliance, we need a global approach, and that includes also our approach to China, because again, the war in Ukraine demonstrates that our security is not regional. Our security is global, end quote. So he's also discussing other things. I believe that they discussed Ukraine and the idea of long-range strikes. He said that he strongly supports Ukraine using long-range missiles to fire into Russian territory, stating that they were imperative if Ukraine was to take out Moscow's artillery positions. So, as hawkish as always, Stoltenberg on his way out. So that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints. One from Sheldon Richman, The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. One from Edward Lazansky, The Odd Couple to Decide the Fate of Humanity, talking about Antony Blinken and David Lammy, the British Foreign Secretary. One from Ted Snyder, The War in Ukraine and the Search for the Goldilocks Formula. One from Ian Proud, Russian Asset Seizure Scheme Will Prolong War. One from Christopher Caldwell, The Imminent Russia-U.S. War. So please go check all of that out. That's it for me for today. You could always support this show by sharing it. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Like, subscribe, comment. All that stuff helps out. I will be back tomorrow with some more news for you. Thanks for listening.